listening to Ken Hudnall. This is the Ken Hudnall Show. Coming to you from our studios. We're out here in exciting El Paso, Texas. Gateway to the Old West and the most haunted city in the country. Well, today is May the 13th, 133rd day of the year. Just 232 days remain to the year's over with. Holidays and observances. Top Gun Day. Host a watch party and dress up in your favorite military uniforms to watch the Tom Cruise classic. World Cocktail Day. And a National Hummus Day. National Apple Pie Day. And a National PMO Day. Leprechaun Day. Dress up in green and run around and throw coins at people. Cough Drop Day. National Crouton Day. National Fruit Cocktail Day. National Frog Jumping Day. Discover Mark Twain's unpublished tale of the jumping frogs in Calaveras County. 6 differences in Health Awareness Day. Yes, there are 2 genders, male and female, in spite of what the media would have you believe. Children of Fallen Patriots Day, National Stationery Day, American Craft Beer Week, and Back to Work Week. And let's not forget National Salt Awareness Week. Well, stories in the news. President Trump is beginning his historic Middle East trip. There's $1 trillion in deals on the line for his negotiation, pushing deals with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and United Arab Emirates. There's an emerging gang said to be more violent and trendy, targeting rural America. It's an emerging Venezuelan gang. And as I say, it's got the potential to be much more violent. And it targets country folks. Well, Biden's media blitz is backfiring as even most Democrats say they just wish he'd go away. And AOC, of course, is strutting around and pounding her chest. She's issued a threat to the Trump administration if the Democrats are blocked from storming into ICE detention centers. She is Fetterman is the latest political casualty. He disagreed with the Democratic Party and they're out to get him. We don't disagree with the Democrats. Well, Colorado Capitol, female staffers fear retaliation. They filed a bathroom complaint against a transgender aide that pushed his way in. You can call it what you want. He can identify as a frog if that's what he wants to do. But the bottom line is he's still a male. Energy Watchdog has exposed the carbon footprint of Bernie Sanders' jet-setting tour. They're calling him a fake socialist. And he says he makes no apologies for his private jet travel. He's entitled. He's important. Well, let's see. One went viral for talk about sitting by the nicest young man. Name was Travis Hunter, second pick in the NFL draft. Fairly famous in his own right. Diddy's trial has started. A lot of folks you wouldn't expect to testify. Let's see. New York Times is defending traditional gender roles. It says something about President Trump. Kim Kardashian testified in the Paris robbery trial, reliving the moment she thought she was going to die. She was tied up and robbed by a number of masked intruders who stole millions in jewelry during a 2016 trip to Paris. Now, what she was doing with millions in jewelry with is anybody's guess. But, Kim Kardashian must always be the best dressed in the room. Agitators who attacked an ICE facility found out they're not above the law. Most were arrested, to include a mayor. The DNC has voided David Hogg's election as party vice chair. And they're denying that their denial is actually political. The problem is, they claim that Hogg and another official were improperly elected, so they're going to vote about whether or not to remove him. Problem is, he thinks he's God's gift to the world. Must think he's a federal judge, one of God's anointed. Ted Cruz wants Uncle Sam to give each American baby $1,000. We'll see how that plays out. Since they're not undocumented, they're probably not going to get it. Now, let's see. And Trump is targeting a massive investment in his first Middle East trip. There is a new food stamp work requirement that's included in Trump's big, beautiful bill, as it's called. Saudi fighter jets escorted Air Force One as Trump landed in Saudi Arabia. Let's see, is there anything else of any interest? There was an ancient discovery of an ancient Roman theater discovered beneath the town hall thanks to a massive earthquake. It's in Croatia. An earthquake led to a chain of events that helped archaeologists discover an ancient Roman theater. It's in the city of Sisak. It's known as an Odeon, found during the renovation of the town hall on a street called Roman Street. The orchestra of the theater was found in the basement of the building. Pictures of the discovery show fragments of the ancient building visible under a glass floor. Stones also appear to take the semicircular shape of an orchestra. Well, nothing is above getting involved in political crisis. Children's YouTube star Ms. Rachel talks to Dantes reported about the Gaza Post. She says it's sad that advocating for suffering Palestinian children is seen as controversial. Well, I don't think we need to have political comments in children's shows. Now that healthcare has been shaken up, as Stephen Hillsley's returned amid the CEO's sudden exit. He was previously CEO from 2006 to 2017, and now he's back for round 2. Now, let's see, is there anything else? Transgender runner has beat freshman girls by 0.15 seconds in a 200-meter race at the Pennsylvania high school meet. Pennsylvania is ignoring President Trump's executive order that keeps biological males out of women's and girls' sports. They're above the law, don't you know? Well, the Republican group believes they're going to gain ground in 2 key Democratic-leaning states in the 2025 elections. That's Virginia and New Jersey. Well, it turns out that Sylvester Stallone and Richard Gere almost came to blows over Princess Diana. Apparently she was considered quite the catch. TikTok star, tired of corporate America, quit his job, cashed out his 401k, and sailed off into freedom. Oliver Widger enters day 13 of sailing from Oregon to Hawaii after quitting his job. He's more than 600 miles off the coast of California, reinventing his life with his cat, a sailboat, and a dream. Monica Crowley has been confirmed by the Senate to become an ambassador for the Trump administration for a key State Department ambassadorship. She's a conservative author, media figure, and former Treasury official. She's going to be Assistant Secretary of State and Chief of Protocol at the rank of ambassador. And I'm sure the Democrats are having a meltdown. Well, Baywatch star Nicole Eggert says Baywatch hurt her dating life. She didn't show up on dates wearing her swimsuit. I'm sure that had something to do with it. Florida State University alleged mass shooter appeared in a mugshot with a disfigured face after being released from the hospital. He's accused of, name is Phoenix Eichner, accused of killing 2 men, injuring 6, when he opened fire on the Florida State University campus April 17th, using a weapon belonging to his mother, who's a deputy sheriff. Let's see. I think that's got that. You know, we've been talking in previous shows about mysterious disappearances. Apparently there are quite a lot of them. It's amazing. Every year over 600,000 people that we know about vanish. Nobody has any idea where they go. And most of them don't come back. Now, there is a lot of folks who have started talking about their adventures in the Bermuda Triangle, the Devil's Triangle, or whatever you want to call it. Many call it the Triangle of the Lost. It's a stretch of water in the Atlantic Ocean known as Maritime Graveyard. And thousands of people and hundreds of ships and airplanes have vanished there. In spite of all the downplaying the media will do, these unfortunates have sailed or flown to their doom without leaving a clue as to what happened. Now, thousands of people and hundreds of ships and planes have vanished in the area we know as the Bermuda Triangle. Most of them don't get reported. We've got a case of an individual, retired clerk from New York State, moved to Florida in 1967. After the death of his wife and daughter in an automobile accident, he became very depressed and went to a doctor, and the doctor suggested he take up fishing, get his mind off his problems. Well, in the afternoon of July 7th, 1973, he rented a small boat to sail from Miami along the coastline. Going to spend a week fishing close in along the coast, camping at night in some secluded cove. And the first 2 days and nights were uneventful, and he described them as very pleasant. He was enjoying the outdoors. Third night, he camped in a small bay, put out his fishing lines, and cooked his evening meal. And as he's getting ready to retire for the evening, a huge glowing ball of fire materialized near his boat. He said it was about the size of a large ranch house, about 70 feet long, 2 stories high, brighter than anything he'd ever seen. In fact, it was so bright and intense he had to turn away. He said the color was reddish orange. He said he'd Didn't know what the thing was, but it was getting dangerously close to his boat, so he got to the boat, and as he got to it, the light dimmed and the whole thing took on the appearance of an old sailing ship. Now, even today, he says he has difficulty describing what he saw. He said, I've never been a person to believe in ghosts or phantoms or anything like that. So you can imagine my shock and surprise, he said, when he saw the outlines of a ghost ship appear on the waters of the bay. And he said it was, even though it gave the appearance of a ship, it was still transparent. He said anybody could have seen it, but through it he could see the outlines of trees across the bay. And he said, of course, he was terrified, and he stepped back from the shore and watched as that ship's image moved slowly past his boat. And he could see the image of people on board that ship. These entities were moving around on the deck as if preparing for battle. He said he could see the outline of cannons, and the men were carrying swords or lances. And as the ship moved toward the open sea, you could see the image was unaffected by the rise and fall of the ocean water. It didn't ride the waves as a normal ship would. Instead, it glided across the surface without moving up or down. When it got to the mouth of the bay, it turned south and struck a course toward the Bermuda Triangle. As he watched in amazement, the image transformed back into the glowing ball of fiery intensity. And then it vanished. And he was left shaken, of course, had dozens of unanswered questions. Finally, he composed himself and moved his camp to a site across the bay. Said he spent a restless night sitting around the campfire watching the bay for the reappearance of that ghost ship. So by daylight, he was pretty out of it. Well, prior to that, he'd never been a believer in the occult. But since then, he's done some research into what he called the hoodoo sea. He's now a firm believer in the Triangle of the Lost. He said there's clearly a dangerous scenario at work here. Maybe something from outer space, could be something or someone from another dimension. Didn't know what it was. He does know he's not going to spend any more nights out there. He used to think ghost ships and such things were a figment of somebody's imagination, but now he knows they're very real. Now, what's referred to as the Triangle of the Lost is a large stretch of the Atlantic Ocean. It starts at the port of Norfolk, Virginia, and crosses the Atlantic Ocean to the 40th parallel. There, it moves down to Venezuela and Trinidad and over to the Florida Peninsula. It's not a true triangle. Its western edge is disrupted by the coastline of Florida. But inside the Triangle of the Lost is the Bermuda Triangle, formed by lines connecting Bermuda, Puerto Rico, and Miami. And the events that have occurred within this zone are staggering to the imagination. Since the first mariners sailed the seas, they've been the subject of sailors' folklore and superstition. Early seafarers to the New World were leery of these waters for apparently very good reasons. Few sailors have changed their minds despite the passage of hundreds of years. A lot of modern sailors avoid the triangle as an effective insurance for what they call a long and healthy life. But there have been hundreds of unexplained disappearances of ships inside that area. One of the most enigmatic occurred in June of 1950. The freighter Sandra sailed out of Savannah, Georgia, bound for Puerto Cabello in Venezuela, loaded with a cargo of 350 tons of insecticide. Now, that ship was well equipped with up-to-date navigational equipment. Radio transmitting, receiving equipment was prominent on board. Captain planned to sail south along the Florida coastline, and it's known the Sandra passed Jacksonville, bound for Miami. But without any distress calls or any cries for help, the Sandra just literally vanished. The U.S. Coast Guard launched an intensive aerial and sea search for some sign of that missing ship. When the single clue to the freighter's fate ever found, it sailed into oblivion. Now, according to a spokesman for the Coast Guard, there's a lot of unexplained things in the Sandra case. First, the ship's captain usually has advanced warning about a possible disaster. This might occur when you lose an engine or punch a hole in the bottom or something like that. The ship doesn't sink in a moment or two. There's always enough time to get a radio message off before abandoning the vessel. And the spokesman also wondered about the lack of debris from the Sandra. She was fitted out with plenty of life preservers, lifeboats, and other life-saving equipment. And there's usually plenty of floating debris around the side of a sunken ship. But in the case of the Sandra, nothing was found to indicate what might have happened to the ship. Now, one of the largest loss of life within the Triangle of the Lost was the 1,080-ton city of Glasgow. It was a holiday Arab gaiety on the docks of Liverpool, England, on the morning of March 1st, 1854. 13 ships were sailing for America that day. Passengers were happy and enthusiastic immigrants who hoped to find new opportunities and a possible fortune in the United States. And as they got into the ship, the passengers chatted amicably. One grinning passenger handed his ticket to the purser and said, "To a new land and a new chance of life. I can hardly wait to get there." Well, an agent for the Liverpool and Philadelphia Steamship Company was there, and he said, "You'll get there all right with time to spare." The city of Glasgow is one of the best ships in the world. Iron hull for safety and plenty of sails, and the wind dies out. We've got a steam engine for auxiliary power. Well, the ship sailed that afternoon with 480 crewmen and passengers on board. It was expected the passage across the Atlantic Ocean would take about 6 weeks. But by mid-April, friends and relatives watched the Delaware Bay for some sign of the ship. Newsmen heard rumors about the missing ship and questioned the ship's agents, Richardson Brothers Company. Amos King, as spokesman for the Richardson Brothers, said, "Don't worry, the city of Glasgow is a safe ship. The engines may have broken down. The captain's probably bringing her in by sail." Well, the mid-May rumors were at a fever pitch in Philadelphia. Newspapers printed daily articles about the possible fate of the ship. One editor printed a lurid account of the ship being plundered by murderous pirates. The newsman published a tip that the ship had run aground off the coast of South America. The crew and passengers had been captured by a tribe of cannibalistic natives. The newspaper printed a report that the ship had been seen near the island of Bermuda. Well, unfortunately, none of these reports proved to be true. Whatever her fate, the city of Glasgow entered the Triangle of the Lost and vanished. No trace was ever found of her passengers or the sailors that crewed the ship. To this day, nobody knows what happened to the so-called Queen ship of the Liverpool to Philadelphia run. Well, there were 5 men on board a ship called the Driftwood. They were in a festive mood as they sailed out of Hudnall, Florida, for a week-long fishing trip around the island of Bimini in the Bahamas. Now, the Driftwood was a 36-foot cabin cruiser, charter boat captained by Johnny Pillay. After buying supplies at the dock, the cruiser sailed off into the Triangle January 14th, 1949. Besides Captain Pallet, the passengers included Logan Iyer, businessman from Nashville, Tennessee, his friend Dr. Albert Sullivan, a surgeon from Nashville. Also on board was Paul Heckert, building inspector, and his friend Bert LeBray, a businessman. Both men were residents of Dania. These passengers knew Captain Johnny Pillay, one of the best seamen in the Florida Bimini run. One friend said to newsman, "Johnny made more than 100 trips to Bimini and back. Got a good cruiser and kept the ship in top condition." Before the trip, the Driftwood had been in the boatyard for repairs. Johnny had the bottom of the hull painted and the engines overhauled. The Driftwood had 2 powerful Chrysler engines that were tuned to a perfect pitch. Well, despite these precautions, the fishing party failed to return to Florida on schedule. A message was sent to the authorities in Bimini. The response was the Driftwood had been seen here. A search of the islands was launched, but no trace of Captain Johnny Pillay and his passengers was ever found. Looked like the small cruiser had sailed into another dimension. Well, flying through the Triangle of the Lost has always been a dangerous undertaking. Some of the first aviators to vanish in this part of the ocean were rum-running pilots during the wild days of Prohibition. Now, the military planes were also lost in the Triangle during World War II. In late December 1943, 7 U.S. Air Force bombers, of course, in those days it was Army Air Corps, roared down the runways at Kinley Field in Bermuda for a flight to Italy. About 300 miles from the island, the bombers encountered strong headwinds, ran into a series of unusual air currents, and the storm lasted no longer than a minute, but the force of the winds caused 2 of the planes to have to turn back to the Bermuda airfield. One survivor of that incident reported, "1 minute we're flying along in formation, next minute we were in an area of tremendous aerial turbulence. Some of the planes were forced upward, others downward for 1,000 feet or more. It was so fast we weren't prepared to handle it, and the entire plane was shaking and making loud popping noises from tremendous force of the winds. Well, the two planes that had to turn back waited overnight in Bermuda and then resumed their flight the next day. The 5 bombers that had flown on into the Triangle of the Lost were never seen again. In spite of the extensive search by air-sea rescue units, nothing was located to pinpoint where they might have gone down. Now, they had radios, life jackets, and plenty of inflatable life rafts. The crews who ferried the planes across the ocean were all trained in how to handle ditching procedures at sea. And it's incredible that 5 planes and their crews would just vanish. But they did. After the war, commercial airliners began to vanish in the Triangle. One of the first was the Star Tiger, a large 4-engine Evro luxury 2-4 airliner en route to Kingston, Jamaica. The plane left London, England, January 27th, with stops at Lisbon, Portugal, and the Azores Islands. Landing time in Jamaica was scheduled for midnight, January 29th, 1948, with 25 passengers and 6 crew members on board that plane. At about 10:30 in the evening, the air control in Bermuda got a radio message from Captain David Colby of the Star Tiger. And he said, "This is Star Tiger, British South American Airways. We're about 400 miles from landing. We expect to arrive on schedule as the weather and performance of the plane is very good." And amazingly enough, that was the last message from the plane. When the Star Tiger was known to be overdue, the U.S. Air Force, which became the Air Force in 1947, at Kinley Field launched a massive aerial search. While Dawn Commander Tom Ferguson had 40 planes sweeping the sea for some sign of the missing plane, and more than a dozen ships were steaming at full speed to rescue any survivors. At the height of the search, more than 1,100 men were looking for the Star Tiger. Well, tired and frustrated after a month of fruitless looking, the searchers ended their unsuccessful quest to find the plane or any survivors. More than 200,000 square miles of ocean had been carefully scanned during that search. Planes from as far away as Mitchell Field in New York had joined in the rescue operation. Well, the search resumed February 4th after mysterious radio signals received by several amateur ham radio enthusiasts. The message TIGER was picked up. A short interval of silence interrupted the message, and then GAHNP was heard. Well, Canadian Air Force radioman in Halifax, Nova Scotia, among those who got the message. So it was in all likelihood probably not a hoax. All planes and ships in the Triangle of the Lost were alerted to the possibility the message would be repeated. The U.S. Federal Communications Commission rushed high-powered directional finding equipment into the area. They hoped to pick up any new message, obtain a fix on the position. Unfortunately, there was no repeating of the message ever received. Star Tiger remained missing. A spokesman for the British South American Airways said we can only conclude the message was a ghoulish hoax. It would be impossible for a plane to remain afloat in the ocean for more than a month. The radio equipment aboard the Star Tiger was too heavy to be carried away from the plane on a raft. If somebody survived the crash, they would have had a light transmitter aboard the raft for sending emergency signals. But no signal from the light transmitters ever received. In England, the Minister of Civil Aviation appointed a court of inquiry to look into the fate of the Star Tiger. The results of their investigations were published as a white paper that concluded it can truly be said that no more baffling problem has ever been presented for investigation. Well, the last paragraph said, in the complete absence of any reliable evidence as to either the nature or cause of the disaster of the Star Tiger, the court's been unable to do more to suggest possibilities, none of which reaches the level of possibility. What happened in this case will never be known. But despite the mystery, the Triangle of the Lost wouldn't finish with British South American Airways. A sister ship to the Star Tiger, another luxurious airliner, the Star Ariel, another 2-4 airplane, was commercialized, a version of the British Lancaster bomber used in World War II. The design was considered safe. It was powered by a Rolls-Royce engine, enabling the plane to cruise at speeds up to 300 miles per hour. On a calm morning of January 19, 1949, the Star Ariel rolled down the runway and soared into the skies above Bermuda. 45 minutes later, Captain J.C. McPhee contacted the Bermuda Air Radio Control Tower, set them about 200 miles south of Bermuda. Weather's beautiful and the plane is excellent in performance. I'm going to change my radio frequency to air control at Nassau, Jamaica. Well, that was the last message ever received from the Star Aerial. The plane carried enough fuel to cruise until 6 p.m. that evening. On board the plane were 12 passengers and 6 crew members. Widespread air and sea search swept across the Triangle of the Lost, and like her sister airliner, the Star Aerial vanished without a clue to her ultimate fate. During the night, one of the most massive searches in maritime history was organized. U.S. Coast Guard planes from Massachusetts, New York, and Georgia were rushed to Bermuda. The U.S. Air Force brought in a B-29 Super Fortress bomber and a B-17 to aid in operations. Coast Guard rescue planes from Florida, Texas, and Louisiana were flown to the island during the night. And the U.S. Navy got involved, adding the USS Kearsarge and the USS Leyte, 2 huge aircraft carriers. These 2 vessels, along with the USS Missouri, a battleship, joined another 6 U.S. destroyers already in the Triangle. Within hours of the plane's disappearance, there were scores of planes, an estimated 100 of them, scores of ships, and more than 14,000 men looking for the Star Aerial. They didn't find so much as an oil slick, a bit of debris, or some part of the plane to indicate the plane might have gone down. Spokesman for the airliner said, we're mystified that Captain McPhee couldn't have gotten out of SOS. Search planes have crisscrossed this part of the ocean without finding a single piece of debris. And after the loss of the Star Tiger, we feel certain the survivors would be found. The reaction to the Star Aerial's disappearance was swift. In London, Sir Oil Dodson, president of A.V. Rowe and Company Limited, held a press conference. He said, I'm convinced the Tudor-4 is a safe plane. My firm believes that sabotage may be the reason behind these disappearances. When Lord Pakenham, the Minister of Civil Aviation, was asked about Dodson's statement, he said if there was sabotage, it would be in the form of a bomb or some sort of explosive on board the Star Aerial. Explosion of any sort would mean there would be a sizable amount of debris found floating on the surface of the ocean. As no debris has been discovered, we have to dismiss the possibility of sabotage. So he was then asked, what does your commission plan to do? And he said, we'll put the Tudor-4 under temporary grounding. We want to make a special examination of the plane to determine if there are any flaws in the design. December 20th, 1949, Air Commodore Vernon Brown, Chief Inspector of Accidents for the Ministry of Civil Aviation, released a report that said, through lack of evidence due to no wreckage being found, the cause of the accident to the Star Aerial is unknown. Star Aerial was lost almost exactly 1 year after a sister ship, the Star Tiger, disappeared in equally mysterious circumstances. And these true losses have led to the withdrawal of Tudor-4s from carrying passengers. Never been employed for this purpose by the corporation since, even though they've operated successfully on the Berlin airlift and elsewhere. The report stated the Star Aerial was in excellent mechanical condition before departing from Bermuda. Captain McPhee was an experienced pilot and had flown that route on many previous flights, and the plane's crew was competent, well-trained, and above average in their flight experience. And all the equipment aboard the plane had passed a recent inspection, including the radio transmitters and receivers. So the report summed up by saying there are no indications the accident was caused by abnormal meteorological conditions. Well, both Tudor-4s were presumed lost at sea. And the disappearance of the 2 airliners in the Triangle of the Lost was a severe blow to the British South American Airways. That firm started serving the Caribbean islands and the west coast of South America on September 2nd, 1946. But after this, the British South American Airways was absorbed by the British Overseas Airways Corporation in a merger. The Atlantic service would resume until March 1950 when BOAC Airlines started flying into Bermuda. So the question becomes, what happened to airplanes in the Triangle of the Lost? And there's not been an answer to this day. Now, there have been even more mysterious disappearances of planes. The story of their disappearances is often the same: no debris, no SOS messages, and no survivors. Some researchers suggested that a rip between dimensions might exist in the triangle. Airplanes and ships speed through this opening and find themselves in another world, possibly another dimension. Well, the frightening implication is that the interdimensional rip operates as a one-way door. Nobody's ever returned to prove or disprove the theory. Well, there have long been stories that Christopher Columbus had a map that showed the New World. He supposedly got it from the captain of a small ship, her name was Sanchez. But history is really not that forthcoming when it comes to Columbus. He did report in his log that while sailing in the area that later became known as the Triangle of the Lost, they did see lights. Now, that's never been thoroughly examined as far as I can find out. He had offered a reward to the first person to sight land, and there were a number of reports of red lights, but they were never confirmed. Well, also, in addition to planes disappearing, there have been sea serpents and maritime monsters seen in the triangle. I've got a report from July 1893. The freighter Hudnall was in the Atlantic at almost noon on a cloudy, misty day when they went into the Triangle of the Lost. And the captain got a report from the first mate that to look at it spotted a sea serpent. Well, of course, the captain didn't believe it. He thought the first mate had been drinking. But then the captain, his officers, and the crew of the Hudnall also spotted this creature. A large barrel-bodied creature with 3 sharp humps rose up a few yards from the ship. The creature's head rose 15 to 20 feet out of the water on top of a long serpentine neck. Well, the sailors and their passengers watched this creature for more than an hour and before it finally sank beneath the surface and vanished into the ocean. Well, a man acquainted with the superstitions of the sea, the captain of the ship, whose name was Kringle, knew sailors have been reporting the appearance of sea monsters since the first mariners sailed on the first voyage across the ocean. He was also well acquainted with the old tales told in waterfront bars about sailors that claimed to see monstrous sea serpents. Well, realizing the importance of the sightings, he got his crew and passengers together and said, "We've just seen a creature that's unknown to science, and I want each of you to write down what you saw. And I want you to sign these documents to authenticate what we've seen." Well, first mate later told the captain he knew those pieces of paper were going to help. Nobody's going to believe if they had a shipload of signed affidavits. Well, scientists, of course, refused to consider the possibility of a sea serpent. One scholar, in all seriousness, suggested Captain Kringle saw a string of porpoises, and mistakenly identified as a sea serpent. Said it was near to the Sargasso Sea, and clearly they spotted a floating island of seaweed. And one expert on marine life wrote an article in a scientific journal stating that Captain Kringle and the other witnesses had seen a combination of sharks and seaweed and porpoises while under the influence of mass hallucinations. Well, Kringle later said, "I don't know what it was. I don't believe an island of seaweed can move at 14 knots. I know a porpoise can't keep his head 15 feet out of the water on a slender neck." And he said, "I've been ridiculed ever since we made our report. I know what I saw until my dying day. I believe that creature was from some prehistoric time." Well, throughout the world over the last few centuries, a lot of respected people have cited sea serpents and enormous maritime monsters, and the bodies of huge unknown creatures have been washed ashore in Scotland, England, France, and a number of other countries. The carcass of one massive monster was beached in Tasmania a few years ago, and scientists that examined it were able to identify whatever this creature was. Well, Captain George Hope sailed through the Triangle of the Lost in 1883 and sighted a weird marine animal. He reported the creature had the head of an alligator, except the neck was considerably longer. Instead of legs, it had flippers. And everybody laughed at the captain's claims till the scientist revealed his description perfectly matched a prehistoric creature known as the Heliosaurus. And in recent years, several zoologists suggested these beasts and other companions may have moved to the depths of the oceans when life on land became dangerous. Now, humanity evolved from singular life in the sea, and dinosaurs and other prehistoric creatures may have reversed the process. Dinosaurs ruled the earth for millions of years and vanished completely, unexplainably. Maybe they move beneath the waves of the Triangle of the Lost. During a meeting of the International Geographic Congress at the United Nations recently, a scientist stated that prehistoric creatures may still exist in the ocean. He explained scientists have discovered shark's teeth that measure a foot in length. To hold teeth of that size, a shark would have to have a jaw span of 15 to 22 feet. And there's a lot of life forms in our oceans that have never been cataloged. You may find ultimately that the deepest regions of the sea has creatures beyond man's imagination. One remarkable scientist is not only a believer in marine monsters, he's often fished for these creatures. That's Dr. Robert Benzies of Columbia University. He used a fishing line with a 2.5-ton breaking point, and he attached this line to a ship's winch, and the fish hook was a 3-foot steel shank that was baited with squid. On one occasion, he was fishing in the waters of the extremely deep Peru-Chile ocean trench along the coast of South America. The hook had been lowered to a depth of 1,200 feet when something grabbed it. There was a moment of furious action along the line, and then the cable went slack. And when it was pulled to the surface, he discovered his 3-foot steel hook had been completely straightened by some enormous creature from the ocean's depth. Author J.B. Halder, writing in Century Magazine's issue of June 1892, talked about a monstrous carcass that washed ashore in the New River Inlet in Florida. He said in the spring of 1885, the Reverend Gordon of Milwaukee, president of the United States Humane Society, chanced to visit in the course of his duties a remote and obscure portion of the Atlantic shores of Florida. While lying at anchor in New River Inlet, the flukes of the anchor became fouled with what proved to be the carcass of a considerable length. Mr. Gordon quickly observed it was a vertebrate, thought it was probably a cetacean, but on examination it had more saurian features. Its total length was 42 feet, its width was 6 feet, the head was absent, 2 flippers or forelimbs were noticed, and a somewhat slender neck, 6 feet in length. Carcass was in a state of decomposition, the abdomen was cut open, and the intestines were protruding. Well, whatever that strange monster may have been, it was found in the Triangle of the Lost. Morning of March 23, 1830, Captain Eugene Deland directed the schooner Eagle southward of Charleston, South Carolina. He and his crew said at about 11 o'clock that morning, a large creature like an alligator approached their ship. It was swimming on the surface of the water. The Eagle sailed within an estimated 20 yards of the creature, and the creature seemed curious and remained motionless as the ship approached. One crewman on board the Eagle aimed a musket at the creature and fired, and several bullets hit the creature and then immediately dove under the ship, and it pounded on the bottom of the ship several times with its tail. Well, newspapers reported the incident and description of the creature. The report said all the sailors had an excellent opportunity to see their enemy and agreed the length was about 70 feet. The body was as thick or possibly thicker than a 60-gallon keg. It was grayish in color, eel-shaped, with an invisible fins, was apparently covered in scales. The head and beak resembled an alligator, and the head was 10 feet long and as big as a hogshead. One other unusual sea serpent was spotted in the Triangle of the Lost March 20th, 1873. The report wasn't published till 1906 on Illustrated London News, printed an astonishing account of the sighting by 2 expert zoologists. And then, encouraged by this report, retired Naval Commander Reginald Young sent the newspaper an excerpt from his logbook that was written aboard the HMS Orontes. March 20th, 1873. It was 3:15 in the morning, he said. Air pump rod carried away, stopped engine. 7:20 in the morning, as Captain Ferry and myself was walking on the upper bridge, we saw something that first attracted my attention through being white, rising gradually out of the water and remained stationary for a few seconds. It was a head of an immense monster. Shape looked to me very much like an eel's head, and it rose about 5 feet out of the water. But what was its length under the water, I wasn't able to see, and the ship was drifting toward it, so I rushed down to the chart house for a rifle. While I was gone, the captain later told me the head had gradually sunk and risen again, even closer to the ship, almost close enough to reach out and touch it. Well, I didn't appreciate the danger of approaching the ship as it turned leisurely, sinking at the same time as swam away in a southwesterly direction, rising to the surface once or twice when the captain had shot at it with the rifle. It's also seen by the quartermaster, the signalman, and by Lieutenant Lane from his cabin port. Lieutenant said his attention was drawn to it when it first rose out of the water, making a snorting noise. Generally considered by those that saw it to be about 48 feet in length. The back of the head was black and the throat and belly was white. The eyes were white and sat well back. A few others saw it, but the crew and the ship's company being at breakfast, there wasn't a lot of folks on deck. And in his letter that he sent to the Illustrated London News, Andrew Young said at the time we'd just come through the Mona Passage between San Domingo and Puerto Rico in the West Indies. Weather was beautiful and fair, and I believe now I must have underestimated the height to which the creature's head rose above the water. I don't believe I should have so distinctly seen it had it only been 5 feet. However, I left it as I originally wrote it in my journal. One of the strangest monsters to be reported in the Triangle of the Lost was seen by the crew of an American schooner in 1883. According to the New York Times, the creature was first mistaken for the hull of an overturned boat. When the crew of the schooner got closer, they discovered it was a turtle estimated to measure 60 feet long and 40 feet wide. The so-called super turtle sounds like something out of the pages of prehistoric times. Such enormous turtles do inhabit the waters of the Triangle of the Lost. We can only wonder what may have happened to the occupants of a lot of doomed boats. Well, before you dismiss the sighting as the figment of an overly active imagination, a number of other reports of enormous turtles have been reported. In June of 1956, a Liberian-registered freighter, the Rhapsody, was approaching the coast of Nova Scotia. Crew members on board that vessel reported seeing a turtle that measured about 45 feet in length, said to have had flippers and at least 15 feet long. The turtle's enormous head was riding at least 10 feet out of the water. In Sumatra, natives have insisted that the father of all turtles exists and appears occasionally on the shores near their village. There have been numerous sightings of giant turtles in the Indian Ocean near Australia and in the Triangle of the Lost. Such incredible turtles could capsize a small boat with ease. Their folk tales handed down in Bermuda tell of an enormous turtle that was worshipped by the original inhabitants of the island. From Worldwide Magazine comes a story of an account of the sightings of a sea turtle in the Triangle of the Lost in 1903. The cargo steamer Tresca was commanded by Captain W.H. Bartlett. When it left Philadelphia May 28, 1903, sailed south into the Triangle. On the third day of voyage, the second officer of the ship, Joseph Gray, saw a disturbance in the water off the ship's bow. He said, I got a closer look, discovered it was a shoal of about 40 sharks packed tightly together. They appeared to be fleeing some type of danger. Nearly an hour later, the Tresco's lookout gave the cry, wreck ahead. Tresco's sail turtle appeared to be a drifting wreck off the ship's port bow. Captain Bartlett told his crew to keep a sharp eye out for survivors, maybe some poor souls lost at sea. As the ship got closer, a head rose above the water. According to Second Officer Gray, the tall, powerful neck of the monster had the thickness and strength of a cathedral pillar. The sight of the vast creature rising up out of the sea terrified the crew, of course. One frightened sailor fell to his knees on the ship's deck and started to pray. Another cried hysterically and dashed below decks. Others were paralyzed under a shocked sense of immobility. This creature remained motionless as it swam toward the ship. Only the beady reptilian eyes and a long snake-like tail moved. Second Officer Gray estimated the creature was about 100 feet long and at least 8 feet wide. Later in his article to Worldwide Magazine, he described the creature, said there was something unspeakably loathsome about the head, which was 5 feet long from nose to upper extremity. Such a head I never saw on any desert of the sea. Underneath the jaw, there seemed to be sort of pouch of drooping skin. And the nose, like an upturned snout, was somewhat recurved. I don't remember seeing any nostrils or blowholes. The lower lip was half projecting, half pendulous. I noticed something dripping from the ugly lower jaw, and watching I saw it saliva of a dirty drab color. While it displayed no teeth, it did possess very long, formidable molars like a walrus's tusk. The eyes were a dull reddish color, and they were elongated vertically. They carried in their depths a somber, baleful glow, as if within them was concentrated all the fierce, menacing spirits that rage in that huge bulk behind. This massive creature from the depths of the triangle observed the Tresca and its crew for several minutes, and then it lashed the water into a furious turmoil. And its frightening red eyes stared intently at the ship. As threatening as it appeared to be, the terrified sailors didn't come any closer to the ship. And finally it turned and swam away. Well, the winter of 1933-34 appears to have been record times for the sighting of sea serpents in the Triangle. Cunard and Mauritania met several of these creatures during a cruise into the West Indies. First monster was seen January 30th, 1934, by two officers who spotted a jet black creature about a mile off St. Eustatius Island. Estimated the serpent was about 65 feet long, 6 feet wide. Head was about 6 feet off the surface of the ocean. February 6th, near the port of Liguriria, Hudnall in Mauritania spotted another serpent judged to be about 25 feet long. Third monster was seen about 600 miles west of Nassau in the Bahama Islands, estimated to be 60 feet long, and there were four large humps capped by a tail fin seen above the water. Both crewmen and passengers on the giant ocean liner took these sightings seriously. On subsequent voyages, the passengers on the Mauritania are always on the lookout for sea serpents in the Triangle. One afternoon, a physician, Dr. R.J. Dodson of New York, approached the ship captain with an explanation for the unusual frequency of the sightings. He said, "What do you do with the garbage from your kitchens?" The captain admitted they throw it into the sea. And the doctor smiled and said, "I've noticed sharks seem to be attracted to the food you throw overboard. It would also appear these sea serpents are attracted by the enormous amount of free food. Maybe sea serpents, like any of God's creatures, large or small, appreciate a free cafeteria." Well, Danish-American Lines America was approaching St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands, October 26, 1934. An Englishman by the name of Mr. George Cooper was leaning over the side of the ship and gazing into the clear blue ocean waters. He wrote a report for Listener magazine in 1953. He said the weather was bright and clear, and at a distance of about a quarter of a mile, traveling at an opposite course, an elongated mass, 50 to 80 feet in length, broke surface in a flurry of foam and spray. A long serpentine neck thrust upwards, and a flattish head, which was flexed and gave it an equine appearance. Behind the neck was a series of 6 or more large protruding humps, chocolate brown in color, moving forward in sinuous motions, giving an illusion of speed. It was probably not more than 15 or 20 knots. Now, Mr. Cooper was excited by the appearance of an unusual maritime monster. He called his wife to the side of the ship, and she saw the creature with several other witnesses. And several of the officers on board the America also confirmed the sighting. During World War II and the necessity of secrecy in the Triangle ended sightings of these monsters. 1948, Ralph Dickens of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, went sailing into the Triangle. Bizarre boundaries. He wasn't expecting to encounter one of the largest creatures in the ocean. After finding a school of fish several miles beyond the shore, he threw out his lines, and suddenly that mass of fish vanished. Waiting for their return, he leaned back against the side of his boat, ate a sandwich, and drank a cup of coffee. He said suddenly he had a strange feeling as if somebody was staring at his back, and he turned around and almost died of shock. He said it was the strangest thing he'd ever seen. It just about scared him out of his sanity. He was looking directly into the face of a giant sea serpent. His head and neck were raised out of the water to a height of about 10 feet. The frightening thing was staring at him with two dull, dark eyes. He said, "I'll never forget those eyes because they protruded out from a snake-like head like a couple of bumps. The eyes would be 5 inches across, and they just stared directly at him." And Dickens told the reporter he was talking to, "I know what you're thinking. You weren't out there to see the creature, but I'll never forget that head. Slightly larger than the neck, about 36 inches in diameter. The head was green with light brown spots all over the head and neck. The thing stared at him for at least a minute, moving its head slightly from side to side, and then it disappeared beneath the surface." He said, "I pulled up my anchor as quickly as I could, and at full speed I headed right back for shore." Well, Tim Dinsdale, author of The Leviathans, published in England, told the story of Edward Brian McCleary, who lost 4 of his friends during a skin diving expedition into the Triangle. McCleary, who was 16, and his 4 teenage companions had gone skin diving during the afternoon of March 24, 1962, off the coast of Florida. Became lost in the fog 5 miles out to sea, and so as they paddled their way toward shore, they heard a sudden hissing noise in the fog. Everybody on the rubber raft shrank back at the smell of a sickening odor. One boy screamed when a 12-foot pole-like object loomed out of the fog and started toward the raft. Gary said the silence was broken again by something out in the fog, and he said, "I can only describe it as a high-pitched whine." We panicked, and all 5 of us put on our fins and dove into the water, and patches of brown crusty slime lay on the surface of the sea. Well, exactly what happened after that's not really clear. McLaren reported there was some screams from his friends, and he saw a beast with a turtle's head, green eyes, and oval pupils. He escaped by spending the night on the hull of an abandoned ship they'd been planning to investigate. In a discussion with Dr. Ivan T. Sanderson before his death, it was debated the possibility of sea serpents or some form of superlife in the world's oceans. According to what Sanderson said, there's probably no limit to the size of creatures in the ocean. I expect the limitation occurs on form as they get longer. Maybe 200-foot creatures that are yet to be discovered in the sea. When you find them, they'll probably be very elongated or serpentine in shape. That'll be true whether they're seals, whales, or other mammals, or even fish. Been more than 1,000 well-documented cases of sea serpents have been sighted throughout the world. A large portion of these sightings have occurred in the deadly waters of the Triangle of the Lost. Can't dismiss the probability that a lone small boat could be attacked by these creatures. As the sightings by the terrified crew of the Tresco indicates, even the presence of such monsters would frighten the observer into bizarre, possibly psychotic behavior. And under such strain, people might abandon ship, commit suicide, or even attack each other in a frenzy of shock. Well, until there are more detailed investigations conducted about the mystery of the sea serpents, we can only wonder about their appearance. Well, author and UFO reporter Ed Hyde talked about an interesting phenomenon that occurred in the Antarctic Ocean. Wrote in Men's Illustrated magazine that something startled several observers by smashing through a thick layer of ice over the ocean. In a writing called UFOs at 450 Fathoms, I told him Dr. R.J. Verlaine, a Brazilian scientist with the U.S. Navy during Operation Deep Freeze at the South Pole. He was shocked into their speechlessness by an unusual object that came smashing out of the sea through an estimated 40 feet of ice. This silver-covered thing soared up and flashed off into the polar sky with amazing speed. Now, the doctor was on an icebreaker in Admiralty Bay when he witnessed this mysterious object. The stunned scientist was walking on the deck on a brisk day when the remaining crew members were below due to the extreme cold. Then he heard an enormous crashing sound beneath the ice off the ship's bow. And rushing to the edge of the ship, he saw enormous chunks of ice being thrown high in the air. Huge blocks of ice came hurtling down all around the hole in this massive sheet of ice. He said the water was boiling. Large clouds of steam came from the opening in the ice. And the enormous noise brought the officer of the day and a sailor on deck. Seeing the hole in the ice, they caught a glimpse of the silver-colored object as it shot up into the sky. Dr. Villela later reported he was unnerved by the affair, and it was certainly no laughing matter to those who saw it. And on that note, we've come to the end of today's show. We'll be back tomorrow and talk more about mysterious disappearances, all those who never came back. Until then, this is Ken Hudnall for the Ken Hudnall Show saying have a truly great evening.